Education. Sandy, will you please call the roll?
Albright.
Here.
Belleville.
Here.
Benford.
Here.
Fuqua.
Here.
Marquis.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Great. Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Got a new flag up there. Thank you for coming this evening and for listening. I'd like to remind all who are here that the vision of the Boulder Valley School District is that we develop our children's greatest abilities and make possible the discovery and pursuit of their dreams, which when fulfilled will benefit us all. We provide a comprehensive and innovative approach to education and graduate successful, curious, lifelong learners who confidently confront the great challenges of their time. And today I would like to start the meeting with the superintendent's report. Dr. Messenger.
Good evening, President Albright, members of the board. Welcome back after spring break. It's good to have you here. Just a few items I'd like to address for the board and maybe for the community as well. We have completed 4 of our community values meetings around the Capital Improvement Planning Committee's work, and we've had good turnouts at each of the sessions. We have 2 more this week, Wednesday evening at Boulder High and Thursday evening at Fairview, and thank all of you who have been working that into your busy schedules and listening in on those conversations. As by design, this is a chance for our community attendees to learn a little bit more about our work around the capital improvement planning and also to share their values, those things that are important to them, and that's led to some good conversation. And all of that feedback information we've received in these sessions, once all 6 are complete, and we are planning a 7th in Spanish, so it'll be presented and facilitated in Spanish. So we've got a tentative date set, but once we have that firmed up, we'll let you know. It'll be in the next week or so because we want to keep these pretty tight together. In the end, a report will be prepared for you and the SIPSI committee and others to see that composite feedback. In addition to that, we will be working with Bvsd Listens, which is our virtual community engagement website. So folks who weren't able to make it to the meeting or want to comment further will be that opportunity. And then later in April, we'll be working to conduct a survey in our community to get some additional feedback. So all of that will be important information that feeds into the Capital Improvement Planning Committee planning process. And as you know, there's a work session on your calendars for May 20th, at which time kind of all of this comes together and is presented to you. So I know you're looking forward to that, and we are as well. The other thing I would just mention is that a lot of good work is going on right now. We've allocated staffing allocations to schools, so we're identifying teachers where they'll be for next year and other personnel as well, what assignments they have and where we have vacancies. And so our human resources team, accompanied by principals as well, are attending in-state and out-of-state teacher fairs or recruitment fairs and, working to continue to develop our candidate pool. So we're very much, it is that time of year, we're very much in the thick of employee hiring, particularly our professional staff. The other thing I would mention just real briefly is that we are continuing to work on our strategic planning process. We have an update coming to you later this spring. The one thing that we have finalized in the last week or so are the co-chairs that will serve in each of the 10 work or design teams that will begin to put the early stages of that together. So we're looking forward to that. In another week or so, we have a meeting with the entire steering committee. So good work with that as well. And we have a legislative update a little later in the agenda, and I have a few things to share with you then. And with that, Lori, I'd be glad to answer any questions of members of the board if there are any. Great. Or other topics.
Thank you. Board members, any questions, comments? Tom? Yep.
Bruce, you're mentioning some of the SIPSI community meetings.
Yes.
I had an opportunity to meet with one of the board members from Peak to Peak this last week, and some of his questions, obviously were related to capital improvements.
Sure.
What Peak to Peak should get, that sort of thing. I know that our charter schools have put in a request to SIPSI. And I was wondering if there are any meetings associated with just charter school communities that were being planned, or should there be?
Yeah. So I'll address that because we've had some conversation. I want to just remind you, this has been a kind of a significant conversation at the state level around the involvement of charter schools in mill levy override elections, and and do they benefit from that, and also bond issues. So the recent history, at least in our district, is that both in mill levy overrides and in bond issues, our charters have participated along with all of our other schools. So true to that spirit, like each of our schools, the charter schools have had the opportunity to provide input with our project managers to identify essential needs, desires, and maybe dreams as well, and that's true of all of our schools. We are approaching each of the charter schools in the same way we're approaching each of our other campuses. And so what you'll have a chance to see as we go through this process is sort of health and safety issues first, those things that we consider essential and critical. So if those schools have those needs, as any other school would, then they will go first on the list. And we're creating, and you've heard this some in the presentations when Don Orr has talked about this, kind of an essential package, a base package that we think are just critical needs. So the charters will be included in that, just like everyone else. And then we've talked some about this innovation and planning work around that. Again, they've been very involved with that. Our plan is, Tom, specific to your question, is that we plan to, once we get through some of this early work and continue to work with SIPSI, several of us will follow up and meet with the leadership and the board, or at least offer to do that for each of the charters. One, to make sure they have that information, because they do have their own governing board, as you are our governing board. And so we just want to make sure, and it's been great about their participation in the meetings and giving us input, but we'll also give some personal attention so that when we get into the conversations in May and June in this boardroom, they will have this adequate background information. I mean, it's a little easier for us to do with our own administrative staff and school communities, but we'll do that outreach to the charters as well if they would like it. So we'll follow up.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Any other questions, board members? Okay. Well, I went to three of the SIPSI meetings to hear in the community, and I just thought they were great and appreciate the work of the staff. Yeah. It was nice. It was a good overview, and it was a good discussion about what the values are, and I was glad to see people engaged in the process. So thank you for organizing those. And
Don Orr and Susan Cousins and many others have been very involved in designing the work sessions.
Yeah, it was nice. Very nice. Okay, any other comments with the superintendent's report? Okay, the next item on our agenda is the DAC report. And Bruce, will you introduce this, or?
Sure, I will.
We've got Lisa Medler and Erica Meyer.
So a new item, standing item to your agenda, recently new, is an opportunity on the first business meeting of the month to give an update on work within the District Accountability Committee. This is a committee, as you know, that is legislated for each school district to have, and we have an active group and have been productive and supportive over the years. It was a request that we would have a standing item to give them a chance to have a little face time with the Board of Education. So this is kind of our first time back at this. My understanding, this was a standing item years ago. So some things come back around, good things come back. And so we welcome our presenters here this evening. And I don't know over time whether this will be a shared responsibility, but we'll take it as it goes. So,
great. Good. Thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. Thanks.
Thank you. I am Lisa Medler, and I am on the DAC exec team. I'm a parent of 2 children here in the Boulder School District. And you want to introduce yourself, Erica?
Sure. I'm Erica Meyer. I'm a new DAC member. I'm just new this year. I have children at Flatirons Elementary. I'm a parent and not on the exec, just representing.
thanks for being here.
Great. So we just wanted to give you a brief update on about having a standing item and where we are with that, and kind of get your input, and we'll take that back to the DAC next month. So just a little bit of background too, and I also want to acknowledge that Laura Hale, the DAC chair, wanted to be here tonight, but unfortunately could not. So it took 2 of us to replace her. So I just want to hats off to Laura. She's done a great job of chairing the group. Just a little bit of history. I've been on the DAC for about 4 years, so I am not new. I think it's been great. A very active group, really committed people, very smart people. Actually, I've been very impressed. And it's been a group that's been really trying to figure out what what is most helpful to the district. This is a very earnest group that really wants to help the board and the children of the district, and have really experimented with a lot of different ways to pull that off. Projects all year long. This is a volunteer group. I want you guys to keep that in mind. And folks really roll up the sleeves. This past year, the group really went back to the basics and used the law, the accountability law, as its guide for what it would really do over the course of the year. So I think that in examining that, and one of the last items on the group's charges is that the local school board and the school district accountability committee shall annually and cooperatively determine the areas and issues in addition to budget issues that the committee shall study concerning its recommendations to the board. So I think, when we talk about this standing item on your agenda, I think that's where the DAC is really interested in having further discussion. And so in working with the liaisons, Tom and Shelley, they had the idea of, why not have a standing item, and let's do maybe some more, quick turnaround study sessions with the DAC, and I will certainly let them talk a little bit more about what their ideas were. But I did want to let you know that the exec team in particular were very interested in this idea, and then in bringing it to the DAC team last week. The DAC was very interested in really fleshing this out. I think what came back from the group is wanting to have a little bit more discussion on what does that mean when a representative goes in front of the board, things like that. So there's a little bit more discussion that's desired, but definitely really eager and felt like it was a great idea. I'll end with that. Eric, if you want to add anything?
Maybe we should open up for questions at this point and see if there's anything else we can answer.
Board members, any comments or questions? Tom, please.
Yes, so I've had the pleasure of being able to be the liaison for DAC for the last year or so, and it's been a great experience, a great group of people there. And I just want to first publicly thank all of them and do this at the board table for all the hard work, a lot of smart people there. Recently, in the last, I don't know, Shelley, 5-6 months, we have been discussing how DAC could be more closely coupled to what the board is doing, because DAC is, a board committee. And I know there have been frustrations in the past that maybe some of the DAC activities weren't closely coupled with board needs or desires, or maybe weren't timely, maybe even a better way to put it. And traditionally, at least since I've been on the board, we've met yearly with the DAC to look over proposed projects, suggest some projects, and then the DAC tackles those and then comes back and nearly a year later and talks to us. So I'm excited about this monthly regular agenda item, because that could cut a cycle time from a whole year down to a month, that we could utilize some of the brain power that DAC has to really help us as we dig into some of the issues that we have to dig into. So that's the discussions that Shelley and I had over structure with the DAC exec. And maybe, Lisa, you can talk a little bit about the meeting and how that went and some of the discussions around that at the meeting. It might help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
About the structure.
About the structure.
Yeah, and how we might do that.
Sure. I think what we had talked about really was a way to have a little bit more give and take with the board. Certainly, Shelley and Tom have been very accessible and have worked with us, and so that's been great, but I think there's also a desire is there a little bit more discussion that can be happening? So I think if there's some quick turnaround projects that the DAC can take on, that might be a good consideration, and maybe some longer term ones. So this is a group of, keep in mind, this is a group of knowledgeable parents, volunteers, so there's some limits on what the group could take on, but I mean, it's definitely one of probably your more knowledgeable parent groups on especially around accountability, very interested in the strategic plan and aligning it with the improvement plan, budgeting, things like that, and just like I said, very dedicated folks. So, I mean, I think that's really the gist of what we had talked about, and really wanting it to be meaningful for both the DAC and for you as the board.
Okay. Any other comments or observations or suggestions? Bruce?
So I would just add, we have tentatively scheduled at least for May 22nd, a work session with DAC, at which time I think, as we worked in agenda setting, that the purpose of that would be to really, to Lisa's point, have conversation about, where this might go and what are some of those areas of alignment and how best to proceed with those. That would be kind of setting the stage for the 14-15 academic year. So rather than waiting to fall to kind of get a jump start on that this spring, and then maybe in that conversation talk a little bit about the reporting format and the conversations that occur with the Board of Education and the DAC representative. So I just want to let you know that that's, 6 weeks away? So we'll be returning to this conversation, and I assume DAC representatives will be in attendance.
Right. I do remember that we talked about that agenda setting, and I look forward to that conversation in April at the end of this month. Is that right? Is that
So
what you said? In
May
May?
22nd, yeah.
The end of May,
Or
right.
May,
Okay.
whatever that is.
Jenny, did you have
Yeah,
some comments to
I
make?
just wanted to say that I look forward to that conversation too, because I've always kind of regretted that we didn't have a conversation about the work that DAC did once the work was done. And there have been times when DAC has had some feedback that came to, I mean, Shelley and Tom do a good job of reporting that back to us, but the direct conversation will be good too. And I foresee that if we have a work session in May, that does get you started earlier than in past, where sometimes we don't get those work sessions done until the school year is 2 months ahead. And I do think that we have to, I mean, and I foresee a place for DAC, sort of side by side with the strategic planning process. It seems to me like that's a place where DAC could be really, really helpful in sort of providing their knowledge and input. So I'm really looking forward to that. And also, I'm sort of building on what staff is already doing, because I know that's also a concern of DAC's and of ours, is that, staff time is valuable, and we want things that DAC is doing to sort of dovetail with things that staff is doing in any case. So thank you for, yeah.
So I would just make a comment too about the strategic plan, and that's one of our highest priorities right now, is to make sure that we're on target with that. And maybe that kind of helpful feedback would be, that feedback from parents would be useful on that committee as a way. That, by the way, is not short-term. That will be a little bit more long-term,
Right.
and probably a little bit more in-depth, because it will be the basis of what we do going forward. And that's, I struggle a little bit with the ideas of lots of little ideas versus one big idea. So that would be something we could talk about and think about in May. It's just one person's view about that. So, it's, we haven't made any decisions, but it is something I think about a little bit. So, anyone else have comments about this? Well, thank you very much for coming today, raising this question. Tom and Shelley, thank you also for bringing this up. You are our committee. You are our advisory group, and I'm really grateful for the work that you do. And we hear about it, so even though you may not be front and center in person, we know that you're there. And thank you for the work that you do for accountability. It's real important. It's an important issue to our community and our teachers. So thank you very much.
Can I say one more thing?
Tom.
So,
Please, Tom.
I'm personally really excited about this, and we have, it's a good cross-section of parents that we have in DAC, represent a lot of schools, and they work with the individual school community and the local SACs. So something like, whether it be the strategic plan that the DAC members can go out to the schools and work with them, get the feedback, try to understand the issues. Another thing that was suggested, perhaps as a shorter-term one, would be with the capital improvement plan. And obviously, that's something that's going to be, we'll be working, I believe, short-term. We'll see. And to get, I know there are parents and community members that perhaps haven't been able to attend some of the meetings, and the DAC members can reach out in their schools and talk to the various parents and community members there. And certainly we would ask that they all have an open mind and that would be the requirement. Go into them with an open mind and really hear what, what the schools are saying, and then bring that back and talk about it and feed that back to the board, which would be great. Now at this last meeting, DAC started talking about some of the projects that they would do potentially next year, and it's premature yet because they're still discussing that. But the hope for these kind of meetings here formally in the boardroom was for the board at large to be able to provide some ideas that we would like. Shelley and I are at all their meetings. We try to do that, but again, it's a whole board. It's not just Shelley and I, and so this is a good opportunity for everyone to to feedback ideas that potentially that could do, and the way the law is written, those are things that is part of DAC's responsibility, and we certainly like that to be a collaborative thing, that we talk back and forth, and because DAC needs to say, yeah, we want to do that, and that they feel they will have the time and the resources and be able to actually make some progress along whatever we would do. So just wanted to say that in closing. Thank you guys again.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is public hearing and public participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment to issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask the persons who address the board, 1, confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking on non-agenda items. 2, limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, which today we have 2 people signed up, although only 1 speaker, so we won't go over to that second hour. 3, recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. There is a lighting system on the podium. It starts at green when you're, in this case it would be 4 minutes start, turning yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and turning red at the end. When the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from other members and proceed with our agenda. So tonight we have 2 speakers signed up, and Lawrence Bashir will be speaking for 4 minutes. Tanya Bashir has given him an additional 2 minutes. So Mr. Bashir, please come to the microphone. And I would just say that we received an email from you, I think board members did, with some ideas that you have. So you may want to hit on the high points of what it is, because we've had a chance to read what some of your concerns are.
Yes, my email was a little long, that's true. So.
No, it's great. Explained it. It was great.
Okay,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I'm Lawrence Bashir, and I've had 2 points to bring up today, 2 issues that are associated hopefully with what I consider to be school business. The first one pertains to Administrative Bulletin 06-3, written in August 1st of 2006, that prohibits middle school students from receiving credit for any classes taken at the high school. This issue came up with a few students who were pushed ahead in math out of the middle school. They ran out of classes they could take there, and they got sent over to the high school where they competed against high school students, sat in that class, got taught by a high school teacher over at Centaurus from Angevine in this case. And I think all 3 of the kids actually got A's in the class, so they did quite well. But they'll receive no credit for that on their transcript, nor they will receive a grade. I believe this rule, when it was written, was probably to take care of the fact that a lot of middle school students are taking what they used to call high school classes like geometry, algebra, and so forth at the middle level, taught by middle level teachers. Okay, so we've got a few accelerated kids, maybe 20 or 30 or so at the school, that take these classes, and when they were competing against middle school students, they didn't want them to receive credit for that class as their high school class, since it wasn't at the high school. But I believe the problem here is that now that some of the times they're sent over to the high school, they should get credit for it, and the issue comes up when they try to apply for a college. You're supposed to get 4 years of math, and because these kids are actually pushed ahead, believe it or not, 2 grades over their grade level in math, they will actually run out of math by the time they finish their junior year. So they would be sent off to a college, Front Range Community College or CU, where they'd have to pay some extra money for themselves to do the last year of their math study at the high school. But they'd have to sacrifice about 3 periods for that, believe it or not. You have to travel, you have to stay there, and you have to come back. So they lose a lot of class time that way. So it's not so exciting for them to do that. But if they were doing that, they would actually receive college credit for that class they took at the college, whereas the situation here is that even though they're pushed ahead into high school, they don't receive high school credit. So we'd like to ask that they review that policy and possibly change it so that these middle school students can receive credit and at least have the grade and the class show up on their transcript. The second issue relates to chess clubs. A lot of schools, I've participated in both the elementary and the middle school level, helped out with chess clubs and led several of the teams. They have their independent chess clubs at the school, and they've been kind of organized together to have small competitions between the individual schools. We would get the standard forms, do all the things the Bvsd wants, background checks for anybody working with the club or there on a volunteer basis. We get transportation forms and even field trip forms to travel to and from the other schools. But this year, Michelle DeBerry and so forth sent out a series of emails to all the administrators that kind of eliminated a lot of clubs because it forced them to prescribe to the rules that are listed in these club categories that I also attended or included with my email. Most clubs are not paid, right? They're not paid positions. So people participating in clubs are usually considered what's called a Category 3 or a student-run club. Student-run clubs do not allow non-school persons to participate, which includes parents and homeschooled kids. Now, we've always had homeschooled kids that have participated in any club that was available to the school in their local area. That includes sports, right? But in this case, this particular Category 3 designation does not allow them to do that. Most sports are situated as Category 1. That's a paid position where there's a staff member at the Bvsd receives some funds to run the club. And if your chess club is organized as Category 1, you can do that. You can have a staff member that looks over it. They're not allowed to teach or instruct, but they are allowed to oversee the club and then have someone else to instruct the kids, especially at the elementary or middle school level. It's important to teach them how to play chess. Is that 30 seconds or what is it?
No, it's been
Oh,
4 minutes.
okay. I didn't get a yellow thing. Which light then? Oh, here? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the. I have nothing up here. Well, it was behind the computer, I guess. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, anything else I can close up with for a few seconds or not?
2 seconds to finish up since you didn't see the blinking thing.
Okay,
but
2 seconds may be a little bit tough. But yeah, what we're asking for is that they revise the club categories to allow Category 3 clubs to include non-school persons, or they organize chess underneath tag, which then once again allows the clubs to have non-school participants participate and to allow competition, which is not allowed in Category 3 at all. So,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay. Let's see. The next item on our agenda is board communication. Board members? Sam, how about if you go first,
Yeah.
Sam?
It's been a while since we've talked, but Jim and I were out at Centaurus High. Remember that? It seemed like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
There was a little power outage.
Yeah, the ninth graders had us in to talk to various people from the community, including board members, and it was just great to hear directly from the kids about what's on their minds in small groups. So just let you know that Centaurus High is doing that and encourage you to participate in this ninth grade community day. The number one concern I heard from the ninth graders was the start time of Centaurus. They feel it's early.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Also, and then Tina and I went for a visit to Broomfield High yesterday with Dr. Pilch and Principal Ginger Ramsey, and I learned about a program that I didn't know we had, which is called Teacher Cadet, where students at Broomfield High can work with a teacher and learn more about the profession of teaching. It's kind of an early incubation of, I think Principal Ramsey said, we're trying to grow our own, get kids interested in being teachers at the high school level and get them, I guess, a little bit of classroom time at elementary schools. Very neat program that I didn't know we had. Finally, I just got that press release via email about Doris Candelari being named Elementary School Principal of the Year, and that is a well-deserved honor for her, and we are very fortunate to have her at the helm at Sanchez. And with that, I just wanted to thank Mr. Bashir for talking and ask you, Dr. Messenger, for your thoughts on those two issues. I mean, is there a way we could change the chess club designation to allow homeschoolers and non-parents to participate?
So I will prepare a report and distribute it to the Board of Education in response. We spent many hours in conversation on these issues, so we'll provide rationale as to the position of the district, and then you may have some follow-up questions, but I'd like the opportunity to do that in writing.
Okay. Same on the middle school course credit?
We'll
All right.
provide a response to both.
Look forward to that. Thank you. That's it for me.
Great, thanks. Anyone, Jim?
Yeah, so I'll follow up, build on what Sam had said. That was just a really energizing day at Centaurus. The kids were, boy, each group had different questions and different concerns, but it all kind of came back to a few. They were extremely excited to hear that we had a lunch truck that may come around soon. So, I urged them. I don't think they believed me, but I was like, when we're out meeting with other councils, typically what kind of comes up even in side conversation is, how do you connect with the youth today? How do you guys do it? You're the school district. How do you do it? And I was telling the kids, I'm like, the public officials want to hear from you. I was like, I get a couple of emails a year from a kid, a student. I'm right on getting back to them. It's neat when they're involving themselves in the process. And no one's emailed yet, but I'm hoping that maybe some of them will take it to heart and let us know what their concerns might be, or just even provide input. I'd like to thank Lawrence for bringing up these issues. I also need to point out that he's taught two of my daughters how to beat me in chess badly, so he has done an amazing thing with the chess clubs, and I know he's just one of many of the volunteers we have throughout the district. It does seem to me that one of the things that we're trying to do as a school board is expand opportunities, or at least not diminish them where there's not cause. And so I look forward to the report from Dr. Messenger to hear about, it does seem like we've reclassified things in a way that's more narrow. Homeschoolers are required by law to be able to participate in sports, and it seems like if that's the case, then we would want to expand access. And certainly the middle school, I think this comes up in East County possibly more than Boulder High, where you just walk up to the university, it's 15 minutes, it doesn't take 3 hours or 3 periods to get a class in. But when you're out in East County, the opportunities maybe aren't as level. And so, again, looking forward to hearing what your report says. I want to end with the SIPSI meeting at Centaurus, which was extremely well attended. 70 or 80 people, all exchanging ideas about their priorities for their school district's facilities. It was kind of interesting how each table reported out and they each had a concern. And I think we all were there noticed, but there was one table that had the police chiefs and the fire chiefs, and safety ended up being their number one concern, which was to be expected, but enjoyed their participation as well. We had a number of elected officials from Erie as well as Lafayette. So I think the community is really getting behind this effort to say, we know we have some inadequate schools out there, and we know we have some work to be done. It's just kind of moving along the process. So and that is it. So thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. Other board members? Jenny?
Okay.
Trying to.
Well, gosh, Sam and Jim, I'm kind of jealous of you guys. Maybe staff could let high schools know that the board members will come out and talk to students if they're wanted. I mean, if
You
we're
need
wanted.
facial hair.
Oh, well, I guess I could get a beard. So anyway, and I'd like to comment on the middle school math issue. So the credit for middle school courses. I'm sorry. So the issue of giving middle school students credit for high school courses they took while they were in middle school is one that's come up before. I've heard this before. It's an issue in the talented and gifted community because a lot of those students, that's who they are. And one parent raised another problem with the way we allocate credit or don't allocate credit, which is that there are a certain number of students who will want to graduate early from high school for one reason or another. I've known students who go off to dance companies, and if they have an opportunity to do that, we'd like to be able to allow that without preventing them from graduating early from high school if they're able to. And one way they're able to graduate early from high school is to take high school courses while they're still in middle school. So, so our policy does kind of choke off that option for some kids, and it's not something that even most talented and gifted students want to do, but for the occasional child who does, it can be an issue. And then the other thing is that a parent raised to me one time was that it just is discouraging to kids not to see evidence of the coursework they did on their transcript. I mean, it's just sort of a, if they did take the course and do well, it just feels bad not to get credit for it at the high school level. So it's just something that comes up not just now, but I've heard that issue before from parents and from staff, actually. So then I'd like to mention that I attended a meeting of the Graduation Guidelines Committee for the CDE on talented and gifted special needs populations. They're having a series of I don't know what all committees are meeting, but I know we have a staff member that's on that's representing special ed, and I signed up to represent, to be part of the discussion with talented and gifted. And one of the reasons I mention this is because I think one of the things that's happened around graduation requirements at the state level that I wasn't completely aware of, because I think it was kind of snuck in, and I'm not sure how I feel about it exactly, although I don't have lots of warm and fuzzy feelings about it, is that we've now, the State Board of Education has implemented graduation guidelines that require students to reach a certain level of competency on some standardized test, and there will be a list, but the basic would be TCAP or PARC, as that comes into place, as a graduation requirement. We have never had test scores as ways to demonstrate competency required in our state, and I actually feel a little deceived because the conversation I sat in on when CDE presented at CASB a couple of years ago, this idea was presented as an alternative, as providing flexibility for students, that they would be able to demonstrate competency in another way, which would allow students who, for whatever reason, maybe wanted to graduate earlier or something, which would actually be good for a category of students, to demonstrate competency that way. But it turns out that's not what happened. What happened was that those test scores are now required. So I feel like that's clearly under people's radar, and it really concerns me. And I just feel like it's a huge change in policy, and I'm afraid it's going to impact students and schools for the negative. And so I just feel like perhaps I was not the only board member that wasn't aware of that, and that we should all keep it on our radar. So that's my my moment to share with the board about a particular new concern of mine. Thank you.
Great. Shelley. Thank you, Jenny and Shelley.
So Jenny, I have a question for you. As a member of the committee, do you have some input into this new testing requirement?
No, they were quite clear that that's not going to change. That those, in fact, it's not actually abundantly clear to me because they have a number of groups meeting, and it's really not abundantly clear to me what they want us to do, because they're pretty clear that they're not changing the guidelines. I mean, I suppose we could send, I think there's going to be some guidance sent out to districts that might involve imposing even more graduation requirements on talented and gifted students, but no, they're not going to, it's not our job to change that. They were pretty clear about that.
Thanks.
Shelley?
So even though they're not here anymore, I just want to thank the DAC reps for coming forward and reporting. And I also wanted to thank you, is it Bashir, Mr. Bashir, for coming forward. Often when people come forward with issues like this, they appear so logical on the surface. And then I often find out that the issue is more complex than we may have thought. So I'll look forward to the report as well and hear what the district has to say about those two items. So thank you again for bringing it to our attention.
Okay. Anyone else? Tom, please. Thank you.
So I was able to attend the the Sipsey community meeting at Monarch this last week. I guess it was it was. Seemed like a long time ago. At any rate, I think it was well attended. Good materials. I enjoyed the discussion and formats, the outputs of the various working groups, and particularly in relationship to what I discussed earlier with my conversation with one of the Peak to Peak board members about the Sipsey process. And I appreciate what you said, Bruce. I think my feelings and yours align, and that I would also add, though, I think some of the top priorities for me are the deferred maintenance, and then the safety security issues. And that's what I communicate to this board member is if those are the ones, we need to certainly treat all of our schools the same, whether charter schools or not. Any building that's got any issues there associated with safety and security, that needs to be high on our priority list, as well as repairing all the schools that we had. And it was good meeting in that Don Orr did a great job. Thank you, Don. I don't know if he's out here or not, but in describing the age of some of our buildings. And I guess I didn't even realize the age of some of the buildings that we have. Certainly, there are a couple buildings that built in the 1800s, but what did you say, there were 60-some-odd buildings that were, 50 years old?
Well, that's the average age, it's around 50.
Average age, right.
70% are over 30 years old.
Yeah. So that's a very important point to our community that, buildings age and security and safety measures change. And certainly we're doing our best to keep up with it, but we don't have a sustainable system right now for doing that, which is another thing that we need to discuss in the future. Also, there's been a lot of email and discussions around class sizes. And I've had a number of conversations this week, a number of emails, and it seems like that happens all the time, but particularly more so as we get into the budget time. And I'll prepare an RFI and send to you about some of the information I'd like to see. But I think it's important for the board that we understand not only the staffing ratios, and how they're changing. And thanks for the email. It appears like over the past few years, those have changed, and we're actually changing by at least 1+ students over ratios we had 5 years ago. So that's a good thing to know. But I'd really like to know at the individual school levels how we're doing on class sizes and some of the rationale behind that. Oftentimes it's, we're limited by space or something like that that's very logistical in nature. And adding extra staff doesn't help because there's no place to put another class, for example. So I think the board needs to understand that. And as we get into the budget process here, I would really like to understand where we are on that. When I first came on the board, Dr. Pilch worked with me, and we put together, at least for the high school level, our class sizes. I don't know, Deirdre, if you remember doing that. But that was very enlightening, and if I can dig that up, it probably hasn't changed a lot. I don't know, maybe it has. But it was eye-opening in the sense that we had class sizing ranging from, less than 10 to 60 or so. And 60 or so are some of the larger classes. There's reason for that. There's either team teaching or their survey classes or band classes or things like that. But there was a lot of things that we could draw out of that, and I think it might be worth just us seeing that again as we talk about the budget and where it's going. Because those are the things that we often hear. I hear a lot from parents is about class sizes and what does that mean. And certainly there's disagreements in the research about class sizes right now. We've seen a lot here recently. So I will put that together and send it to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, anyone else? Okay, the next item on our agenda is an information item, the legislative update to remind us and bring us up to date on where we are with the legislature, our major funding source, and where we're getting some directives. Looks like Briggs Gamblin is coming to the podium, and Bruce, would you like to
So I'll take
introduce
lead
this?
on this, and Briggs can add. So a number of things are going on. Many of you probably know parts of this, but I'll give a quick overview, and I think any of our staff that work closely with this would be glad to answer your questions, and some of you are as well as informed as we are, so you can answer questions among yourselves. But one of the major areas of work we've been about this session has been around school funding, and so House Bill 1292, sponsored by Murray, Hamner, and Johnston from the Senate, has made its way, and has gone through some modification on its way, and so it appears that it's about ready to go to the Senate, and so they're just got some text. They're working on some revisions yet tonight, so we'll see. But I think the big pieces are probably in place. So I just wanted to mention a couple of those. As you know, we've been working hard, we being collectively the school communities across the state, board members, superintendents, teachers, parents, business leaders, to work on this negative factor, to restore funding to the level it should be by our Constitution at this time. It's $1 billion less than it should be, 16% deficit on school funding across the state. We were informed by legislative leadership in the governor's office there would be no increase in the negative factor this session. Right now, House Bill 1292 has $110 million to restore the negative factor. A little more than 10% of what is due, but it's better than zero. And so I think we should collectively be pleased where that's at, and we need to sustain that through the Senate and to the governor's desk. At one time, there was $80 million in negative factor and $100 million in one-time implementation funding. So the conversion rate of how they turned one-time money into ongoing money is an exchange rate that I personally wouldn't endorse any of us working from, because initially they took $60 million and made it into $20 million. And then just this last week they took $40 million and turned it into $10 million. So that $80 million of negative factor dollars became the $110 million, but we lost $100 million of the one-time implementation. So the superintendents have formed a position in response to House Bill 1292, and one of those is to turn the clock back and go back to $100 million on the negative factor and put the $10 million back to $40 million, because the reality is $140 million hitting our schools next fall is obviously $30 million better than $110 million. So we have had some conversations with legislative leadership about that, and I would just say not everybody thinks that's a great idea in the legislative arena, but we want to engage in the conversation. This present status of 1292 is the result of a bipartisan both houses working together. So it would appear that much of what's in 1292 when it leaves the House will stay intact through the Senate. So this is a piece on the funding. The other thing that was in the, 1292 initially was the average daily membership, changing our count system, a significantly burdensome system we anticipate from what we saw in the language of the legislation, and costly for money would go to CDE to do this, no money coming to schools, of course, to do it. So we fought hard against that. It was removed from 1292 for now. Apparently there'll be a study around how to count students going forward. The other dimension of this bill we've been working on is transparency. There is a lot of transparency in our state around public entities and their funding. So some of this is around how that information that's already public will be packaged, and then maybe more importantly, how it will be used. And so we have some concerns about that. This is a high priority for Governor Hickenlooper, as was ADM. Our understanding, he's still very supportive of trying to create greater transparency, so there's a better understanding how every dollar is spent in every school district by child, by school, by content. And we think, again, that'll be pretty burdensome on local school districts. There's a fiscal note of $4 million. It was $5 million. It's down to $4 million. For this, all that money would go to the Colorado Department of Education, and no money would go to school districts to create these transparency reports. We'll keep working on that. There is also $35 million that would go to English language learners or English language development. That would go in addition to the $17 million that the state of Colorado funds. So it's a small part of the money that's spent in our state around English language learners, but clearly for districts that need to do more or can supplement, so many, including our own, are using general fund dollars to support ELL services, so this might supplement some of that, so that could free up some dollars. That's important. Also, $20 million for the READ Act. We invest as a state around $20 million. Presently, a little more in the READ Act at almost double that amount. Our take home on READ Act today is around $320 $29,000, $30,000. So we've estimated that we might receive somewhere around an additional $300,000 if that stays intact. Then House Bill 1298 is the School Finance Act. 1292 is a standalone piece of legislation to complement what's in 1298, which is the bill carrying the annual School Finance Act. This includes a cost of living adjustment, which is now 2.8%, which would be the revenue on a per student basis that would flow as a result of that, and also money for growth, which is about a $40 million cost for the state of Colorado to do that. That entire package is well over $200 million to do those two things. Embedded also in 1298 is $17 million for early childhood education, Colorado preschool program, and also to support full day and early year kindergarten programming. And so we'll see how all that shakes out and what rules are attached, but there would be a possibility for some additional funding to augment our money we already see for Colorado preschool program and early childhood education. So time will tell on that. The other bill that I'd like to mention is House Bill 1202. In the last month, you approved a resolution supporting the study around assessment. That was an amendment that was attached to an accountability bill on 1202. I think there's good support for that. Hopefully it'll make its way through. We will actively be involved in indicating input, if not participation, on that study committee if we would be so fortunate to have a member appointed to the committee. The appointment of that committee, if it's enacted, would be July 1 with a report prepared for prior to the legislative session. Bvsd, which is the Educational Research Laboratory in San Francisco, is doing a on contract some analysis of testing. We've given some feedback to Bvsd already. There have been some survey collection data from our district and districts across the state. So that'll help supplement the analysis that goes on with this study committee, is our understanding. So they've gotten started in the process. Then the last thing I'd mention, just a little bit where the superintendent's group is. This is our effort to organize school districts through school leadership of the superintendency. We've remained intact. We've remained unified. We've had good conversations. We identified about 10 superintendents representing a cross-section of our school districts in the state, from the metro to the east, the west, rural, mountainous, and I am serving on that representative group in part because of my role with CASE as the legislative co-chair with Randy Miller. Randy is the superintendent. In Eaton, we had a conference call yesterday morning at 7 a.m. to work on some things, and so we have been conversing and communicating regularly, again, trying to be responsive to needs of schools. Yesterday afternoon, a couple of us met with Senator Stedman and Senator Heath to visit about where we are with school funding and other issues, including assessment. Good conversation. The comment was made that we kind of get mixed message, and I said, well, give us a chance. We're trying to coordinate the voice of 178 very diverse school districts. It's a little awkward at times, and we bump into each other, but the good news is you're hearing from the superintendents and from school districts. And so anyway, it was a good conversation, and although we were told at the beginning of the session there would be no money for the negative factor, obviously we've made progress collectively, and it isn't just the superintendents, but we've been helpful in that, I think. And so anyway, we'll continue forward. Our plan for this group is that we'll get through the session. We're basically supportive of 1292 with some changes that I mentioned earlier. And so we'll do another letter to the governor and to the legislatures at the end of the session, reflect on how the session went. And then we have 2 days scheduled for June for the superintendents to come together to begin strategizing for the next session so we can be a little more proactive going forward. And obviously we'll work with our education partners, CASB, CASE, and CEA, our education association. So those are some bills we've been working on, and I'd be glad to answer questions on those bills, or I know Briggs could brief on others, or whatever questions you have or things you'd like to share. Thanks.
That was a lot of information. A busy time in the legislature. Thank you for your report. Board members, any comments or questions? Or Shelley?
Since one legislature can't bind another, what do you think the odds are that this actually will be recurring money going forward?
So, Shelley, you're correct. I mean, really every dollar spent by the state legislature in the general fund is one-time money. I think the difference probably is some of it is an intent and a commitment. The School Finance Act, which is embedded in 1298, which is really where this $110 million negative factor influences, is annually renewed. Constitutionally, the legislature is obligated to do that. Clearly, since 2009, they've made $1 billion of reduction in that. So, clearly they've exercised the privileged to do that. So, I mean, I guess that we believe that we're working, and we think sincerely with the legislature to build this foundation up. So I think we're optimistic. I think one of the concerns about the implementation money, the one-time money, is that, you know, to use that to sustain services, knowing that it will end in 1 year, is, you know, a concern. So, I mean, I think as long as the economy is strong, we're pretty optimistic that these foundation pieces, English language learner, the READ Act, the negative factor, really are, you know, steps up towards a higher level of funding. But what has been evidenced is that that certainly could change, especially if the economy struggles again, because there's just a lot of pressure on the revenue sources already.
Sure, Shelley, please.
And what impact will this deal have on the state education fund then?
So some of the money that's being utilized in these funding bills is coming directly from the general fund in the long bill and appropriation. Some of it is coming out of the state education fund. So it's a mixture of the two. So part of, you know, Senator Stedman serves as the vice chair for the Joint Budget Committee. So that was one of the reasons we met with him yesterday. I mean, he openly expressed concern about some of these commitments that are made for K-12 and other sources or other programs that he believes aren't always sustainable, or in many cases aren't sustainable. So I think an over-dependence on the balance that's in the state education fund is risky. The state education fund refreshes itself by design, but obviously if you're taking more out than you're putting back in and making it for ongoing costs, that could be problematic. So not unlike when we build our budget here, those are things we have to be sensitive of. So, I mean, the state education fund is part of the solution, but until such time as a state, we might choose to allocate more resources into the state education fund so that it could maintain the level of funding that would be adequate for schools. So there's some risks certainly associated by spending down the state education fund. The governor and Henry Sobonay, the budget director, and others really do want to keep a healthy balance in the state education fund, a little bit of a cushion and protection, given the variability that can occur in a state budget annually because of changes in revenue. I think we would agree that makes sense, but the question is, what does that cushion need to be? And then that obviously needs to be reviewed and decided upon year to year.
So I'd like to just follow up on that statement that you just made, and it was about wanting to have a really strong and healthy reserve at the state level, but yet many school districts are dipping into their own reserves in order to pay for ongoing programs. And so it's just an interesting pressure that's being put down at the local level.
Yep.
That's painful.
Yeah.
So
we've had a lot of conversation about what is that right balance. I mean, obviously we understand the state legislators and the governor, they have a responsibility to manage the state general fund. That's, you know, their charge, and your charge is to do it locally in our district and districts across the state, municipal governments and counties. So it's what is that right balance, and there is tension there. Obviously it shouldn't be one and not the other, vice versa. So I think it's really trying to strike that balance.
okay. Other comments? Anyone else? Jenny?
There was a bill that has be supported around transparency that they thought at one time was a good compromise, and I don't know where that is or what our thoughts are about it. It was brought forward by Representative Wilson.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that is or whether we hate that as much as, or I won't say hate.
So
but
it's been
we're nervous
amended.
about that one.
It's been amended pretty significantly in a positive way since it was introduced. We just received word that it will be introduced on the floor tomorrow as well, in addition to the compromise bill that was drafted with the governor's office and CEA today. So we'll see. I mean, my guess is ultimately what comes out the end will look different than probably things we've seen so far. I mean, that's how the process works. But yeah, we felt that Representative Wilson, retired superintendent, we probably didn't fully agree with where he started, but we felt that we had made progress on modifying that bill through the course of the early part of the session. It was parked for a while, and now apparently it's going to be resurrected. So we'll see. Yeah, that's
And I just asked because there was some thought that that might be a compromise that
it may be in the end, yes.
some people can live with. So, and at one point, some of the ELL money was going to be awarded on a competitive basis to school districts who did well and taken away from school districts who had more difficulties. I wonder if that's...
Most of that language was dumped in the early work with the House on 1292. So there were the competitive grant piece that you mentioned, also some new expectations and requirements as it came into the categorical funding. I mean, this isn't this isn't done yet, right? It's still in process. But it went in to look more like the English Language Proficiency Act, ALPA, and so more like money we receive, except it would pay out for services over a longer period of time, more than the 2 years, which ALPA. And mostly the limitations on the ALPA dollars, the English language dollars today, is simply just a lack of funding. So, I mean, you can take the 17 million and spend it out over 5 years. You can spend it over 2 years, but if it's only $17 million, you're just going to get less every year. So I think by adding more money and loosening up some of the timeline restrictions, I mean, I think there's belief that most students, given the right supports, in 5 years can acquire the language. No one really believes that can happen in 2 years. So, but that really isn't that folks thought you could do it and acquire the language in 2 years. It's just all the further the money went. So some of what was in that early language on the ELL has been taken out.
Well, that's good news. So then my final question would be, is there anything that the board can do, I mean, that would be helpful? Would it be, I mean, how can we support you in your efforts in the next couple of, I mean, because we know there's a time crunch.
So I think what we've been asked, Briggs and I, we today communicated again with schools and parent leaders. I think that continued messaging is really important. You know, Senator Jones had a nice op-ed piece in the paper a week or so ago in the Longmont paper. So some of us dropped a note just to reinforce his advocacy for K-12. So I think whenever we can reach out, especially to our local legislators, to let them know we're following their work and we appreciate their support, et cetera. I think once this gets over to the Senate side, there may be some targeted work we'll do around this one-time money or not, and around the transparency, that once we feel like we know exactly what that might look like and who best to communicate with, Briggs and I will communicate that to you. And so again, I think just a quick phone call or an email, and again, that may not be our representatives that we need to make contact there, because it may be members of the Senate Ed Committee initially, which, you know, we've communicated that listing of folks so you know who they are. But so it's some targeted communication maybe in the next 2 weeks, Jenny, once we know better what we want to message on that could be helpful.
And just a reminder to board members that CASB's, our regional day at the legislature will be a week from tomorrow.
It's 16th,
I mean, you
I
can
think,
go
yeah.
tomorrow too if you wanted to, but so I'm, it's on my calendar, so.
Yeah.
And that would still be,
I think that timing will still be good.
I have a final, anyone else? Any comments on this? One of the things I've been thinking about a lot is the stability of school funding and what happens to Boulder Valley, what happens to other districts in our state. You know, this board historically has had a leadership role in looking at issues. I mean, 14 years ago, 2 board members on this board said we've had enough and we need to think about school funding, and they were instrumental in getting Amendment 23 dreamed up, thought up, and then signatures, and then the voters voted for it. And I just think it's really important to remember that legacy as we think about where we are and to bring those ideas forward. I mean, this board particularly has a real important role, I believe, in making sure that we're talking about what the issues are. So thank you for your work and making sure that our lobbyists are talking clearly about, you know, how strongly we feel about this. One of the things that I worry about with all of this, in particular because Amendment 23 was designed to be stable funding and long-term, is that this notion, Bruce, that you just mentioned to talk about moving this $40 million down into $10 million of recurring money. So $10 million recurring versus $40 million 1 year. If there's a way to get that into the base, I'm more interested in supporting it. But otherwise, $30 million, they don't buy teachers. That doesn't get us very far with what our goals are. We teach in the classroom. We work with kids. And so it's troubling. I mean, we can always use more money for one thing or another. I mean, we have a SIPC committee that's working hard on facilities, but at the same time, I just think it's really important for us to be thinking, and for the public to be thinking about our legacy here, and that there should be long-term recurring funding. And I think that that's a message that is just crucial. So I know it's, I'm preaching to the choir here. I mean, we've all talked about this at length, but I just think it's important for the public to understand. The legislature has lots of choices about where they could spend money, and they have clearly chosen to spend it in other areas rather than education this time. And, I think it's important for them to, for the public to know what's happened. So that said, kind of a discouraging message, but keep lobbying, keep the faith, keep working, and I am very grateful for your work. I'm especially grateful for the work of the superintendents. I think it's been an amazing, powerful group, and they speak for communities, and it's important. And I think that's why you've together with other superintendents have been as successful as you have. It's a great group.
Thanks.
So thank you.
I want to just comment one more thing on the funding. Then Briggs, I would ask maybe if you would comment on the one around the executive session, that legislation that has been and been reintroduced, if you would. Yeah. But I want to just comment quickly on, I mean, one of the things that has been a bit unique about the superintendent's group, and maybe one of the things that we're maybe most proud of, is watching colleagues argue for needs of school districts that are not their own. When we have urban, suburban superintendents arguing for rural educators and rural educators arguing for needs of urban districts, I mean, part of it is folks just simply didn't understand what was unique about Holyoke or Marino or Denver. I mean, folks just didn't know. And so lobbyists can only go so far with that argument because they don't live it every day. But when you get those voices, and that occurred in the meeting I had yesterday with Senator Stedman and Senator Heath. The one thing I want to say, then I'm going to hand this back over to Briggs, is that Senator Heath made the point that we're fighting over a fixed amount of money, and that that's not necessarily a bad thing. But in the end, there's not enough money to go around, and we still need to find additional revenue source. And obviously, recently we haven't had much success with that. And what I conveyed is our commitment is to do both: secure money short term so we can get programs sustained or back in, and also commit to finding revenue sources that will help not only support K-12 but all of our state services, because they're all in a very difficult way. So, I mean, we all know that that's the longer term solution to this. So, Briggs, do you want to comment on the other bill?
The other bill is, now the number escapes me, I believe it's 182, but I'll double check that. It's in your latest legislative update. And this is an attempt to reintroduce House Bill 1110, which was earlier postponed indefinitely. It was the one that would have required various reporting requirements and record keeping on executive sessions, and the belief of this board and other boards across the state and other school executives across the state and many legal minds across the state was that was going to have a chilling effect on attorney-client communication that's so necessary to the running of a school district, and that it was an overreaction to a situation that had occurred primarily in one school district, and an emotional reaction to a personnel action that occurred between a school board and a superintendent in a neighboring district, and that was probably not the best way to make policy for 178 school districts. And so what happened was, quite frankly, the bill passed the House, the 1110. It got to the Senate, and one senator, Senator Nancy Todd, Democrat of Aurora, made it clear that she could not support the bill, and then another Democratic senator made it clear she could support the bill, and that in effect made a floor majority against 1110. So, I'm sorry, it wasn't Senator Todd. Senator Todd was a sponsor. It was another two senators who did, and so Senator Todd moved in committee to have that bill postponed indefinitely. But they did create the possibility it would come back again. So they're coming back again with a more watered down version that would require a logging of conversations. But again, we have felt, and based upon advice from our legal counsel and other lawyers in the state and other associations in the state, we still oppose the bill, and we think we have a chance to stop it in the Senate. The Senate's very close, 18-17, and so I think that bill. You don't never make a prediction. It always gets a little crazy in the last month, and they do have to adjourn 1 month from yesterday. But it appears that we should be able, I think, to stop that legislation, and hopefully argue for some reflection about this kind of policy making.
Great. Thank you. Jenny, please.
So I'd like to address, thank you for your work on that, Briggs. That's sort of the weeds as far as, but it's really important to our functioning as a district, so.
You're very welcome.
It's not.
And I want to thank Ernestine Mondragon, because she not only took charge on that for us as one of our 2 lobbyists, but she really led all K-12 lobbyists on that.
Yeah, well, yes. So thank her too. I mean, we're fortunate to be represented that well at the legislature. I just want to comment on the long-term solution, because I think it's pretty clear, the evidence of the last few years, that that the state voters in the state of Colorado support public education and have shown their willingness to vote for funding at the local level. And so I think that the will to fund public education, our taxpayers have it, but they don't trust the state legislature. And I think one of the reasons they don't trust the state legislature is because of the way the state legislature has treated Amendment 23. And it's sort of a way to prove that they're not trustworthy, because they're not spending money in the way that the voters have asked them to spend the money. And so I think that this business of refusing to fund back the negative factor, or calling it a myth, and claiming that, or claiming publicly, as I've heard, that we're fully funding public education in this state when clearly we're not by any reasonable definition, only hurts the legislature's chances of arriving at a long-term solution. I mean, I'm probably, again, speaking to the choir the same way you were, Lori, but I feel like, really, I mean, this goes to the trustworthiness and good governing policies of our legislature. And I think at the local level, we can say that we spend money, that we tell our voters how we're going to spend the money, and then we spend it that way. And if for some reason, there are differences, we try, we explain that clearly and have long public input sessions. And I think the legislature could stand to follow our example.
Great. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Briggs Scanlon. Thank you, Bruce Messenger, for that legislative update. The next item on our agenda is the consent grouping, and I'll read them. Personnel items: approval of minutes March 11th, 2014. Approval of minutes March 18th, 2014. Appointment of District Accountability Committee members. Authorized purchase for 3 school buses. District Unified Improvement Plan. KDE Crisis Management Policy. Materials adoption for art, music, and physical education. READ Act assessments, which are iReady and iStation. Grant a Special Education School to Work Alliance Program, or SWAP, Colorado Division of Vocational Rehabilitation 14. Do I have a motion to approve? Jenny? Sam, second. Are there would anyone like to pull one of these items? Seeing none, are there any comments or questions to any of these items? Jenny?
I just have a comment. I'd like to say that I happened to see a teacher back when I was on a school visit, a primary grade teacher a few months ago, and she was absolutely thrilled by the new reading assessments. She said that they were, she was a first grade teacher, and she said that they were easy to administer, and they lined up well with our new standards, and gave her really valuable information about her students. So I'd like to congratulate our staff on picking a great new assessment.
Great. Tom?
So I have a question as well on the READ Act assessments with iReady and iStation. From my understanding, these are K-12 tools, but we're only purchasing K-5 portions, and I was curious as to why that was.
So the primary purpose is our obligation under the READ Act is to administer them at the grade levels. And so obviously districts can do more than what's required. So initially, Tom, we have our obligation under the law is to identify students who are deficient in the reading development as early as young as we can. And so these will be administered to all of our primary grades, K-1, 2 students. Once they make their way to intermediate grades, we would only assess if those who the information would be valuable. So it won't be every student every year for students who are proficient there at those levels above, although they will be included in this membership, this subscription. So I think over time, we'll be better able to answer that question. A couple things. One is, what value does it add for all levels of readers? And what will the burden be for other assessments? So where does Park fit into this? And so, not to test multiple times on information that gives us the same information. So I think I wouldn't say that's, and it might be targeted populations of students at upper levels as well. But I think initially this gets us started. So the commitment on this contract is really to a multi-year, 3-year, to get started, and then we'll assess it, and then we'll know much more about the other assessments as we go forward. So I would say, and then also look at other assessments. So we've used DRA 2 for a number of years. It is not a state-approved test for the READ Act. So there's quite a bit of internal conversation going on, and until we see iReady and iStation, does that assessment still have value to us? So, we're not saying teachers cannot administer that. We're not requiring that they do the DRA too. So I just think in the next 3 years, realistically, that's our commitment on this assessment, and to see how it serves us. And so I wouldn't rule any of that out, but I think initially it's really trying to get our feet on the ground and also being respectful to the burden any assessment may place on our classrooms. We also have the readiness assessment that will be introduced for pre-KK. So so I think we'll just see that door open, Tom.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Shelley? Yeah.
I was just reading about a district in Oregon who felt like there was a lot of emphasis on reading, but not very much emphasis on writing, and that a lot of these tests are designed mainly for reading.
Yeah.
And so they have instituted their own grade level assessments for writing. And I'm just wondering what Bvsd is doing in that regard.
So I would just say, Shelley, with regard to writing, not as much as we'd like to be doing. And that's not to say we don't have good writing instruction, that we have students who are good writers. We just had this conversation yesterday among our instructional leadership team about increasing our expectations around writing assessment and making sure that it's juried in a way, if we do assessments, that it's a valid and reliable measure. And so some of that's going on right now with teacher peer-to-peer review of those writing samples. I think again, probably is in part my response to Tom, is that we want to do more with that over time. However, we also recognize the burden this is going to place on classroom teachers, particularly in the K-5 schools, pre-K-5, because they teach all of those content areas. And so, not that it's easier at the higher levels, but generally you'll have teachers that are focused just in a single content or maybe two. So I think it's on our list of things to worry about. I'd also say that it'll find its way into our discussions around instructional improvement and student success in the strategic plan. These different content areas are sort of queued up around assessment. But again, trying to get some of these things that we know we have to do in the 14-15 school year with the new Colorado measure for academic success, the CMAS, and PARC is a part of that, this iReady, iStation. So we haven't lost track of it, Shelley, but truly probably de-emphasizing the formalized assessment of it, not the instruction of writing, but the assessment of it until we get a few of these things underway. We just had that conversation yesterday, how important that is.
Thank you. One of the things I read about this particular district was that their focus wasn't completely on just assessment. It was more on the instruction of writing. Absolutely. And that it was, drop everything and write for 5 minutes kind of thing without really assessing. Just the experience of writing.
The experience, absolutely. And so I do want to just affirm that I believe overall we have a strong commitment to writing and good instruction around that. Some of those strategies, probably not as consistent as we would like, and that's work that we need to do, and continued professional development around those strategies, and then doing the right level of assessment. So for both accountability, but also for students to get feedback. By middle elementary grade, students really can. Or younger, begin to understand what those developmental characteristics are of writers and begin to look at their own writing or even peer-to-peer that. So there's a lot of strategies that I know are being used in our district. So I did want to suggest that we aren't doing good work around it. I just think there may be some value where we can hold ourselves collectively responsible if we get some of these assessment measures in over time, but probably go slow with that.
Great. Any other questions on this? Okay, seeing no other questions, Sandy, will you please call a vote?
Albright.
Yes.
Belleville.
Yes.
Benford. Yes. Fuqua.
Yes.
Marquis. Yes. Myers.
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is a resolution regarding Bvsd Bike to School Day proclamation, and Shelley's going to read it. So everybody can know what's in it, so our public can know what's going on with this.
All right, this is a resolution in support of the 2014 Bvsd Bike to School Day. Whereas students, parents, and staff are coming together to bike and walk to school on April 22nd, 2014. Whereas April 22nd is Earth Day, and it is a great time to teach children about the environmental benefits of human-powered transportation. Whereas a lack of physical activity plays a leading role in rising rates of obesity, diabetes, and other health problems among children, while choosing active transportation to school offers an opportunity to build physical activity into daily routine. Whereas students cycling and walking to school reduces traffic congestion and air pollution. Whereas the Boulder Valley School District has a robust Safe Routes to School program. Whereas the Boulder Valley School District engages in a crosswalk safety initiative known as the Heads Up campaign, delivers cycling education through the BLAST program, bicycle lesson and safety training, and encourages students to walk, bike, bus, and carpool to school through the Bvsd Trip Tracker Rewards program. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Boulder Valley School District, RE2, proclaims April 22nd, 2014 as Bvsd Bike to School Day, as recommended by the superintendent of the district. And be it further resolved that such designation and authorization shall remain in effect until or unless modified by future resolution of the Board of Education. Adopted this 8th day of April, 2014.
Great. Do I have a motion to approve this proclamation? Sam? Is there a second? Tina? Comments? Besides suggesting to everybody to bike and walk? Tina?
I've already registered my daughters. We're really looking forward to biking on April 22nd.
Oh, good. Okay. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Great. Sandy, will you call the vote, please?
Albright?
Yes.
Belleville?
Yes.
Benford?
Yes?
Fuqua?
Yes.
Marquis?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is discussions about upcoming agenda items. Are there any comments or suggestions? We've been going through the, Tom, please, go ahead.
I think, we had the work session over Amendment 23, and I believe that's slated for a discussion at the upcoming board meeting. Is that correct?
Right. It's on the agenda for April 22nd.
Great.
And we'll see it, I think, as an information item. And at that time, we'll discuss where we want to go at that point. But you're right, it's on the agenda.
Okay, great. Second thing is, since Jenny brought it up about the graduation proficiency test and graduation requirements, that may be a good information item as well for us.
Oh, okay.
It's a suggestion.
That reminds me of some other concerns we've had ongoing about graduation requirements, A, from the state and B, from us.
Right.
So I think it's an important topic
Yeah.
to think about.
And figure out how we want to attack
on
it,
the
because
list.
there's a lot of
Okay.
information there. Yeah.
Right. And how many are our own requirements? How we want to deal with it. Yep, good question. Okay. Anyone else? The other items? Okay, so the other thing, pardon? Oh, Shelley, sorry.
I've had parents ask me about this several times over the few years that I've been on the board, and I just want to, I don't know if it's an information item or an agenda setting item or what it would be, but there's concern that some parents are not allowing their kids to take the ACT, the school level ACT, because the score is being recorded on their transcripts. And they're concerned about how those transcripts might appear to colleges. They would prefer that their student determine whether the ACT is a better test than the SAT so that they can position themselves better for college admissions. And if they take the ACT without knowing whether they're better at the SAT or the ACT, which often is the case because it's early in the process when the district gives the ACT, that they could be disadvantaging their kids by having that put on the transcript. So I guess my question is, why do we do that? I'm assuming there's a reason for it. I don't know what that is. And also, are we aware that we're actually discouraging kids from taking a test that we want them to take so that we can ascertain how well we're doing at that level? And the other thing about the ACT that people have brought up over and over, and I know that we even have it in our legislative platform at one time, was could we also include writing? That would very much encourage parents to take the ACT, because then it would count for college admissions. Right now, it doesn't count for admissions, but it's on the transcript and may not look good for their child. So I just want to bring that up finally. I mean, it keeps coming up over and over every time about the time we give the ACT. So any information you could provide.
So I think I can answer most of that, Shelley. It's a state law that requires every high school age student to take the ACT. So, but there are other statutory requirements around assessment, so a student can opt out of that. But there is a state law that requires it. So the other thing that we've received some correspondence on is the desire of students if they want to substitute a higher ACT score if they take it privately, and that is an option in our district. And so if they score better, if they take it privately, and maybe they take the writing assessment, they can, there's just a form they need to fill out to petition to have that replaced on their transcript, or they don't have to, but that's an option they presently have. The state funds the ACT assessment, and they have not chosen to fund the ACT writing assessment. So, so I think what you said is right, that many families whose student children are going to an institution that ask for that writing assessment, then most likely they're going to be obligated to go take that assessment on their own, which they may have planned to do anyway. So there has been some discussion around should the state requirement include the writing, and so there have been, lots of conversation around that, but presently that's what goes on. I mean, if we chose to take that on district, we'd simply have to pay the bill for all that, or, so that's how it plays out. I don't know about the SAT place. Jonathan, I don't know if you want to address. I would assume a student can obviously take the SAT as well as the ACT. The SAT is not a requirement in the state of Colorado, nor will it suffice or supplant the ACT score because, well, for probably obvious reasons, but the ACT state assessment, and obviously not every state does this, but that's a way for the state to benchmark student success or growth over time by having one common assessment. Kind of an exit, not required until maybe the future to pass to graduate, but it has a history of maintaining that base level information. So that's I think, and Jonathan may have greater detail, but that's kind of the playing field we're working in.
So I understand that it's required by the state.
Yeah.
And I understand that the SAT is not,
Right.
does not suffice. What I don't understand is why it's on Bvsd transcripts.
Oh, we're required to place it on the transcript
You are.
by state law, with the caveat that they can substitute a different score if they choose to. Do I have that right, Jonathan?
Exactly.
So we are required to place it on the transcript by statute.
And what is the point of that?
Oh, I don't know. The legislature would probably have to respond to that. They passed the law.
I mean, that certainly doesn't have anything to do with assessing a kid's progress, which is the point.
Yeah,
of
I don't
giving
want
a
to
test.
assume that I know what the motivation for both, well, I have a sense I have a motivation around the requirement of the ACT exam, which we kind of just talked about. I think the requirement to put it on the transcript that's in statute, I don't know the full motivation for that unless they want to be sure that if the state invests that level of money, that there's documentation for each individual student, one, that they took it and how they did on it. The decision is a local decision, and it's allowed within the statute that we can do this substitution. Again, districts may handle that differently. That's just how we handle it in our district. So it's a statutory requirement.
I'll take it up with my legislator.
Well, this group of legislators might not recall when the bill was passed. I mean, but yeah.
Okay. Before we adjourn, I guess this is a reminder that we have a meeting on Friday with the Broomfield City
Yes.
Council at
At Emerald, 7:30.
7:30
At Emerald Elementary.
Elementary, right? And so board members are invited to attend, and the community is welcome to come. It's an open public meeting with the Broomfield City Council. And Jenny will be running the meeting, because I
that's
will
right.
be out of town. So, any other comments? Great. Well, then, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
There we go.
7:30.